Hey, what's happening? Today we're doing a fun episode. It's going to be potato croquettes. It's a recipe that was actually inspired during a stagiaire I'd done at Thomas Keller's Bouchon here in Las Vegas. The recipe I'm giving you is not going to be the same they use there. Much like a few other recipes I've showcased and will be showcasing, it's not mine to give out. So I am going to have to augment it a little bit just to make sure, I guess to protect someone else's property and to make sure I'm not giving out something that ain't mine to give out. It's still going to be pretty goddamn good. Hope you enjoy. Boy.
Let's go! Run over with the past. Did you really think punk rock wouldn't last? We may fade away, but rock and roll is here to stay. Burn that bridge when it's time to cross. Pedal to the metal and I feel real boss. 10:30 gig on a Saturday night. 10:30 gig and I feel alright. We gotta run it up, take it out, set it all up, yeah. Rock this joint till the walls come down. Run it, take it, set it all up, yeah. Rock this joint till the walls come down. We gotta load it up, take it out, set it all up, yeah. Rock this joint till the walls come down. Run it up, take it out, set it all up. Rock this joint till the walls come down, go!
We're cutting some chives today. Chives are one of my favorite fresh herbs, and contrary to popular belief, not a member of the onion family, even though both the flavor and aroma are very similar. One of the big secrets to cutting chives successfully is to make sure your knife is nice and sharp, because what you're going to be doing is you're going to put them on your cutting board. You're going to want to hold them as loosely as you can while keeping control, and you actually want the weight of the blade to do most of the work while you push. You don't actually want to press down, and you don't want to express all the beautiful essential oils contained in there, because that's where all your flavor and smell comes from. And as you see, we've got these beautiful little open rings. They're not mashed down, they're not abused looking, so if you use them as a garnish, they're going to be beautiful and sexy, and they're going to be retaining all their flavor. And one way you can tell if you're doing a good job cutting your chives, as you can see, my cutting board is still white. If it goes green, that means you're pressing too hard or your knife's way too dull. And sometimes if you're having a hard time getting a clean cut towards the end of your chive, it's not the end of the world. If you're like me, you like to clean your own meats, throw the ends into your bag of meat scraps that you're going to be using to make stocks with. They may not have the best texture being frozen, but at least you will preserve them so they're not going to waste, and that way you can stretch them a little further and you don't have to go and get herbs just to make stocks. If you cook enough at home, you're going to be accumulating a good amount so you can flavor up your stocks when it comes time. You just keep throwing them in that freezer bag, and you'd be surprised how quickly you'll amass a nice collection of deliciousness. And these little ends may not cut nice, but they'll make a huge difference when it comes to making a chicken, beef, pork, or fish stock.
That's right! Hey, 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 hey! Pour that bridge down to the ground. There's the door if you don't like the sound. You'll all fade away, but punk rock is here to stay. Well, the wave of the future run over with the past. Did you really think our music wouldn't last? You'll all fade away, but oi is here to stay. We're gonna run it up, take it out, set it all up, yeah. Rock this joint, the walls come down. Run it up, take it out, set it all up, yeah.
We've got our potatoes cut, we've got them into some water. We're gonna add some salt. We're gonna boil these guys pretty much down to something that you could mash, because we're going to want to make like a nice thick paste to them, and that's going to be the starting point of our beautiful little croquettes. We've got our potatoes cut and our chives cut, so everything that all of our veggies are cut. Now it's time to get our meat down on the cutting board. I've got a couple strips of Porky Heaven, the soon to be endangered bacon. I'm going to cut these and cook them a little bit. It's going to add a huge bit of flavor, and we're going to want to cut them nice and thin so that they go fast. So we got our bacon cut. We're going to throw it into a saute pan. We're just going to want to cook it a bit of the way. We don't want it crispy per se. We don't want a hard piece of bacon in the croquette. At the same time, we don't want to leave the frying oil to do all the cooking. We want it a little bit of the way. We want to bring out some of the oil so it's not going to be too greasy. We don't want it leaking through the croquette and making it soft and just basically damaging the integrity of what we're making. But we're going to let this go for a little bit, and then once this and the potatoes are done, we're going to start combining all of our goodies.
Easy now.
Okay, so our bacon's been on for less time than I had to smoke an entire cigarette. It's getting a little brown, but it's not quite crispy and killed yet, which is about how you want bacon to be. Some people will tell you that bacon should be crispy. Unfortunately, those people are wrong. You still want it to have a little bit of give, and you still want it to have some flavor. You're not trying to make pork leather here. We're going to take this, get it out of the pan, and into a little bowl so it stops cooking on the heat. You can take the bacon grease and put that aside for other projects you may have. We're not going to want this to be super greasy because we don't need too much liquid going into our croquettes. Everything we're putting in there is going to be controlled and measured. Okay, so we've let our potatoes boil and they're nice and soft. We've drained them off. We're going to put them into a nice sized bowl because we're going to have to mix these guys up a little bit with everything else that's going to go to make these delicious little croquettes. I've got my potatoes in a bowl. They're drained. I'm going to pop these in the freezer for a sec because I'm going to be getting my hands in there. We're going to cool them down just a little bit. They don't need to be hot necessarily when we mix them. We don't want them cold per se, but a few minutes in the freezer will definitely bring them down to a little bit more manageable, and we don't want to continue them cooking once they're off the pot. While we're waiting for our potatoes to cool down a bit, we're going to take our two separated egg yolks and take either a fork or a balloon whisk, and we're just going to break up those yolks and make one consistent liquid that we can pour in while we're mixing the potatoes. We're not so much interested in an exact measurement as we're going for a consistency and a texture. We don't want this to be too wet because once it hits the oil, we don't want it to fall apart. Plus, the egg yolks will help give it a nice golden brown while it fries. We've had our potatoes in the freezer for just a few minutes. We don't want them to be cold. We for sure don't want them frozen. But it's given us enough time to break up our egg yolks and make sure we have our mise en place set. So we're going to take our bowl, and you can either use flour, or I'm actually going to use as a binding agent some cracker meal. To up the ante on the flavor a little bit, I've taken some white cheddar Cheez-Its and we're going to use these guys instead. We're going to start by getting just a little bit of these in here. And we're going to add just a pinch of chives. Everything that we're putting in, we can go back and add more as we go along. We don't want to overdo anything. Except, maybe the bacon. You can't ever have enough bacon, so that'll be okay. But we want to get our chives, our bacon, our cheese, some cracker meal in there. We're going to want to get a nice little hunk of mascarpone cheese to start, and then we're going to get our salt and pepper plus a little bit of garlic powder. With the salt and the pepper, you don't have to be shy because you are going to want this to be well seasoned all the way through. The garlic powder, it's going to be a matter of taste. I really don't suggest putting a lot in because you've got a lot of other strong flavors happening. You want to accentuate, not overpower. We're going to start with just a small amount of our egg yolk. And just like everything else, you can always add a little bit more as we go along, but it's a real bitch to take it out once it's in there. Now, I'm a big fan of getting my hands dirty and getting them down in here, and making sure you clean your hands if you're going to do it this way. But you don't necessarily have to be like me. You can get a hand mixer. You can use a blender if you feel like cleaning it out. Or if you happen to have a potato ricer at home, this is the absolute perfect time to break it out, to get your potatoes more broken down so they'll be more uniform in the mix. But we want this to be nice and thick because we're going to want to actually roll this out into little fingers. We've got our potato mix made together. We're going to take some cracker meal or flour, depending as to what you want to go with. And we're just going to put a little bit down because we're going to use this to roll out our potato mix and make little fingerlings. That is going to be the basic shape that's going to carry us through the rest of the process. Now we're just going to want to take our potato, shape it in your hand a little bit, And you're going to want to go for the size that you want to serve. I would say, if you're familiar, a mozzarella stick size would probably be a nice size to shoot for. And if you see it taper, you can always pinch it off and throw it back in there. So this is about the shape you want to get. And we're going to make these, put them aside, roll out your potatoes, and then we'll move on to the next step. We've gotten our little potato fingers rolled in either flour or cornmeal or cracker meal. Now we're going to roll these little bad boys in some panko. We're going to put them aside. And once we're done this, we're going to start getting our oil hot. And then it's just going to be all cooking. Now, you don't want to cake the stuff on, but you do want to make sure it's adequately covered. We've got our little croquettes rolled out. They're covered in panko. Now if you're not ready to cook them right away, you can always take a sheet pan, throw down some wax or parchment paper. You can freeze them. Once they're nice and frozen solid, you can throw them into a Ziploc baggie, a Tupperware container, or whatever it is that you like. You can save them until you want to cook them at another time. Me, they look good. I'm hungry. We're going to get some oil going on the stove, or if you have a deep fryer, you want to turn that on. Get your oil up to about 350 degrees, and once that's going, we'll start making the magic happen. Our croquettes have been rolled out. Our oil's nice and hot. We're going to want to get these guys right in there. And you're going to want to be gentle. You're not going to want to just chuck them in. We're not making French fries at the McDonald's. These guys are delicate, beautiful little things, and they should be treated as such. And just be careful. The oil is going to come up a bit. You're going to want a pot that's going to be able to hold more than what you're putting in there by a bit. Oil expands when it gets some liquid in it, and you don't want to boil over. It's a miserable mess, and you run a big risk of hurting yourself or people around you. Or if you're like me and have a dog constantly underfoot, you don't want to go scolding the pooch. We'll know they're done. It's going to take about 3 to 5 minutes to cook, but they'll be a nice golden brown. They'll be crispy, and you're just going to want to pull these bad boys right out of the oil. Give them a minute or two to cool down and rest. You surely don't want to go burning your mouth on these. And I can tell you, this oil is going to be hot, lava hot. We'll get these bad boys onto a plate, get ready to start eating. One thing I did while I was waiting for the oil to heat up, I took some of my leftover mascarpone cheese, some of the bacon nectar, plus a little bit of sriracha, like hot chili sauce, and some ketchup. And actually in a 1, 2, 3, 4 ratio of bacon, the bacon nectar, the sriracha, ketchup, and mascarpone. So 4 parts mascarpone, 3 parts ketchup, 2 sriracha, and 1 of the bacon grease. Made a little dipping sauce. You can just put this right over these guys. And if you were smart and you kept a couple of chives handy, it makes for an excellent little garnish. You got something that's going to look pretty on a plate. You can also go with sour cream and give it more of a bloated baked potato sort of feel to it. But play around with what's going to taste to dip in, or you can just serve these with breakfast. A little white sausage gravy next to some eggs. Fantastic. Hope you enjoy. Bon appetit. I'm Eddie the Skinhead Gourmet. A tout dolores, motherfucker.